Hey guys, so this is part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, please go to my channel and click part 1. Anyway, let's get into it. So, like I was saying, we're at her 16th birthday party, and she was like, hey guys, I think he's cheating on me. And I'm like, ha bitch, that's what you get. Karma's a bitch. And she's just like, hey Vanessa, can you text him for me? Like, because she was like, I guess he's not texting her back or not answering her or whatever. And she's like, oh, I texted him, he didn't answer me. See, and then he's like, Vanessa, text him on your phone. And I'm like, sure, why the hell not? I don't give a shit. It's whatever. So I'm like, hey dude, it's Vanessa, Taylor's friend, what's up? And he goes, hey, what's up? Hey, he's like, hey Vanessa, what's up? And I'm like, I didn't really answer right back, because he answered right away, and I guess that's what she wanted to see or whatever. She's like, I knew it, like, he not texting me, blah blah blah. And I'm just like, okay, whatever, this drama, like, let me go home, like, I'm tired, I'm done. So I didn't text him back after that, because that was it. And later on, everyone's like, oh, just forget it. And I just forgot it, and we were just doing whatever. And later on, I went home, and he texts me, and he's like, hey, you never told me what's up. What you doing? And I'm like, dude, honestly, I was at Taylor's house. She was worried that you were cheating on her, or some bullshit I said, like, something like that. Like, I was telling him the truth. Like, she just wanted to see if you would text me back. That's why I was texting you. Like, you don't gotta text me back or whatever. And he's like, wow, that's fucked up. Like, I can't believe she did this or whatever. And the third, yada yada yada. And yeah, I think he was like, oh, I can't believe she think I would cheat on her and blah 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 and shit like that. And I said, like, something like, dude, like, you cheated on T, and she was so sweet. Like, obviously you a cheater. And he's like, oh, I did one mistake and that was it. It was for her and blah blah blah, shit, whatever. I'm like, whatever, you don't need to tell me your fucking story. I ain't no priest. Like, get the fuck off my phone, like, type thing. Like, I'm just like, whatever, all right, bye, like, I'm out. And that was how I got his number on my phone. So anyway, I'm doing my shit, I'm doing my thing. I'm still depressed, honestly. I'm still depressed. I'm still, like, battling shit. I'm still cutting myself every day. I'm still doing a lot of that. And now I'm like going on, like, websites and like seeing, like, those websites or whatever. I think I told you this in my Why I'm a Teen Mom thing, but I can't remember. But yeah, I was going on websites. I was putting in my, like, profile. I was having, I was having sex with, like, random guys. Like, I was just doing that, like, to make me feel better. And I'll probably do more of an in-depth video on that probably next. But anyway, I was doing that for a little bit or whatever. And I think a month passed by, and all of a sudden, I get a text from Brian. He's like, hey, what's good? And I'm like, hi, who the fuck is this? Because I didn't save his number. And I'm like, who is this? And he's like, oh, it's Brian, Taylor's boyfriend. And I'm like, oh, hi, what do you want? Like, what's going on? And he's like, he said some bullshit, like, oh, I was trying to get in contact with Taylor, but I can't reach her. Are you with her? And I'm like, nah, nigga, I'm out. Like, like, I'm like, duh, like, dude, like, it's like 12 o'clock at night, nigga, I'm out. She probably home sleeping. Like, that's probably, we can't get her. And he's like, oh, okay, I was just a little worried. And I'm like, Okay, no problem. Bye. And he's like, oh, what are you doing out? And I'm like, I'm out. Like, are you my parent, bro? Like, who the fuck are you? Like, who is this nigga on my phone? Like, you know, I was like, who are you? Like, what are you doing, bro? And he was just like, you know, I was just wondering. I'm like, I'm out. Like, mind your business. And he's like, oh, okay, have fun. And, like, stay safe, something like that. And I'm like, okay, great, thanks. So a week goes by. And then I go and I think I was home. And I was just laying in bed. And I get another text message. Another text message from Brian. He's like, hey, I think he said, hey V, what's good? And I'm like, why are you giving me a nickname, bro? Like, the fuck is going on? Why are you texting me again? And he's like, and I'm like, hey, what's up? And he's like, oh, again, I can't reach Taylor. Have you heard from her? And I'm like, nah, nigga, I don't. I do not hear from Taylor. Like, I'm not her keeper, bro. Like, I'm like, no, I haven't heard from her, but I talked to her earlier. She said she was gonna go bed early, so whatever, that's fine. He's like, oh, okay, sorry to bother you. And I'm like, oh, it's not a bother. Even though it was a bother, I'm like, dude, like, leave me alone. I'm like, oh, it's not a bother. It's okay. But anyway, he's like, oh, what are you up to tonight? And I'm like, oh, nothing. I'm in bed. Like, I'm just chilling tonight. He's like, oh, not going out tonight? I'm like, nah, nigga, like, I'm like, nah, I'm fine. I'm staying inside. And he's like, okay, well, have a good night. And I was like, good night. Then the next day, he goes and texts me. He's like, hey, good morning. And I'm like, I text right away. I'm like, I haven't heard from Taylor yet. She's probably still, like, sleeping. He's like, oh, no, that's not why I was calling. I just wanted to say good morning. And I'm like, okay, good morning. Thanks. And he's like, oh, what are you up to today? And I'm like, not really doing much. Just chilling. Right? And he's like, oh, okay. Yeah, me too. And he's trying to have a conversation with me. I'm like, dude, go talk to your girl. Like, leave me the fuck alone. So anyway, he goes and he texts me. He's like, oh, you know, I just want to see, you know, how your day was going, like, later on. Like, so this is the later on in the day. He's like, oh, I'm texting you how to see your, how was your day? I'm like, my day is fine. Like, why are you texting me and not your girl? And he goes and he's like, oh, Taylor doesn't really like to text as often or whatever, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh, that sucks. And he's like, oh, maybe you can talk to her and things like that or whatever. And I'm like, okay, fine. So anyway, I go and I tell Taylor, I'm like, dude, you should text your boyfriend more because he's bothering the shit out of me. Like, he's just saying that you don't text. And I was like, what? And she's like, I text him all the time. And I'm like, I don't know, whatever. So anyway, like a couple days later goes by and he hasn't texted me. I'm like, okay, great, maybe I helped. Then he goes and he texts me and he's like, hey, what's up? And I'm like, nothing. What's up? What do you want? And he's like, oh, can I ask you a question? And he's like, and I'm like, sure, what's the question? And he's like, what is your opinion on blowjobs? And I'm like, whoa, why is this going there? And I'm like, I didn't really respond later. And he's like, oh, you know, I just had a question, you know, just curious, like, not anything, whatever. Anyway, I guess this is going to be a part 3. So stay tuned. I told you this is a long ass thing, bro. But stay tuned for part 3. All right.